So thank you so much for jumping on. I won't keep you too long. The team were like, why don't we do like editorial to complement it? Like, what can I do? What can I do that I haven't already done? And I mean, I've discussed like very small pieces of Wolfvision. What I thought cool this time is to actually break down your work of like the idea, and then how many iterations you went through, inspirations, and then just how it came together.
So initially, Tom and Ross, they brought me on because I work a lot with stop motion and more experimental animation. So and we kind of, regardless of what we do, we may end up making everything out of cardboard, for instance. But often we will do a previs in 3D sometimes, or there's any kind of things we can do to lighten the workload or allow us to fine-tune the editorial process to make it really quick to edit things before we make the final decisions. So this is something I brought on board. At Tom and Ross, they were like, "Oh, we know exactly what to show you. Here is a clip of a Labrador with like a GoPro strapped to its back, and it's just like running. The momentum of it just running towards the beach, and then just jumps into the water, and it's like, okay, that's what we want to do." And it's like, cool. I know this video really well already, so yes. They had already done some concept work. Emmanuel Askia Brassa, using like charcoal and inks and any kind of stuff we could get on the screen. Well, how does that fit into the scope of what the project demands now? It was kind of look-based first, so it wasn't always the most like logical way to construct the image, because there's a lot more elements that we need to be considerate of. The hookup shots, its placement in the film, and how it needed to complement what was there already, all these kind of things. So when I was first talking to Tom and Ross, and they were like floating this idea in front of me, and they kind of hadn't really like quite pinned down the scale of it in the project, but then it became so integrated into the story because of how useful it was to display the different perspective that Robin is living through, and opening up the eyes to the dimensionality and the movement of Wolfvision, which was like a different reality than the rest of the film in many ways. We had a lot more different locations and towns and all these kind of little bits and pieces, and it's like, okay, well, how do we make that practical for production? So we kind of had to dissect it and reverse engineer it. So that was the main part of the first development. After we established, okay, yeah, the camera, it does need to move a good bit. There was some concepts I did which were not fully 3D. They were more like almost more like a stage diorama feel. And they're like, okay, well, we can move the camera a little bit like this, but we can't go here, we can't go there. And then from there, we kind of went, okay, well, yeah, we do need a bigger set. We need, actual a whole forest that we can build. I did some tests in VR. We could figure out scale relationships really quickly. And it was really quick to rough stuff out. But it just wasn't as sophisticated as we need to be for production. So we did transition into using Blender for doing the final 3D builds. And we had two Blender artists with us, David and Daniel, who work in games and things like that. And they're just much more sophisticated with their Blender knowledge than myself. The physicality of the character we brought into play, even though they're not present on screen themselves, because of the way the camera moves, it makes you feel like, oh, this is actually a character running, like it's lunging, it's doing these kind of actions, its head is going up and down. And that was an important part of immersion for this, because it was about kind of drawing you in.
I was just going to ask, like, how long? I mean, because the sequence, like Wolfvision is not, it's not the entire movie. So,
yes.
Like, how long does it take to put together? Or how long did it take to actually put together?
Well, it was mostly me for the first like 9 months. Because there was a certain things like in the animatic was still being assembled, so the Wolfvision can then slot in where the shots are kind of more locked, and when they aren't locked quite yet, we kind of had to like wait until they were ready. So in that case, it was basically just me prototyping, going, okay, well, we have this location, how might we approach this location? how might we approach that location? What are the range of motion that is desirable? Like, how do we translate this digital, 3D animation into something that can be put through a paper pipeline? Animator named Bill Croyer, and he actually hosted a VFX seminar for Wolfvision. So like, it was very, very interesting because like, oh yeah, I know your stuff, and I was kind of like, I think like 40 years later, basically doing the same method he was doing, and he was developing really, really early 3D animation techniques. His film is really nice and clean, and it looks like really professional and really like polished. I was okay, well, we have a really kind of quite clean 3D image, and the style of the film is all about the rough edges. It's all about how things are like a little bit texture. You can feel like the hands of the artists. Depending on the type of location, we had different treatments for the way we rendered in Wolfvision. Even though the town is, say, a little bit more rigid and a little bit more controlled than like the forest, which has more of a flow, the town still has an organic feel. The lines are kind of chunky. They have like an edge to them, like they've been carved, rather than like a ruler where it's just a straight line. So for the forest, we did those all flat on one layer. So we had a printout of our 3D animation in magenta, and then we would draw on top of that with our graphite and our charcoal and our like whatever other bits and pieces we had. We would smudge it, we would streak textures around the place, and basically build up the tones and the lines, like obscuring the clarity of the image so it makes it more lived in. So again, like the opposite of what like Bill Croyer, he wasn't happy with the cleanup line on the digital output because it was like you could see the polygons or you could see like the angles. So we were like roughing it up even more.
I love that, because I was going to say, when you do stuff like obviously hand drawn, you've got the lines, you've got that's something that made the visual of Wolfwalkers so beautiful. Like it is that throwback to traditional animation, whereas when you do something on a computer, it's so clean and pristine. And thank you for explaining the process of how you kind of undid that to fit. Like because of the way it was done, like it doesn't pull you out of the out of the viewing experience. I think it's so important.
We could have possibly, rather than having to print it out, like there's a shot of Bill in the town, so he was rendered in TV Paint, and Tatiana Matze, she was one of the supervisors for figuring out how to do that cleanup, so it did approach and approximate the render style of Wolfvision as well. There are ways in which the way you make something can inform the decisions you make. Like if you have the ability on a computer to undo anything you make and redo it, it can sometimes breed a certain hesitancy or timidness, because you're like, you're kind of just like edging forward a little bit at a time, rather than if you're working on paper, there's only so many bits you rub out before you have to just throw the page out and start again. So you have to be a little bit more brave, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna keep going forward. Like everything that was on screen from Wolfvision in the end, like for the backgrounds moving around, it was all rendered on paper, and the stack was maybe about 4 feet high of paper.
So that's the info I need. All right, I love that.
Cool.
No, that's amazing. You've gone through everything that I needed. So, I think I have everything. And so, if I have any other questions, I will definitely reach out.
Perfect.
But thank you so much for jumping on. And
no, that's a pleasure.
Appreciate you breaking down because Wolfvision, we did it.
Yeah.